Stephen A., don't just go to your podcast, just don't go on TV and say anything willy-nilly, because we're going to fact check you on this show.
Pulled a gun out and shot Jam Master Jay twice in the head at close range. He died on the scene. It's a personal story for me because I grew up with Jam Master Jay right there in Hollis, Queens, New York. Both of us lived on 203rd Street. He was on one avenue, I was on another. He was very, very good friends with my late brother, Basil, who passed away in a car accident in 1992. That was the last time I saw Jam Master Jay, which was a few months later, because he was gone and he was out of the country. Run-DMC had been performing. And when he came back and he saw me, I was the one who informed him that Basil had passed away. He didn't even know at the time. I've always loved that brother. Definitely was sad when I heard that his life was taken from him so unceremoniously, so viciously. I still miss him to this very day. Run-DMC was special, no doubt about it, but Jam Master Jay was a part of it. Somebody making that music for him. He was a good brother in a lot of different ways. I know my brother Basil loved him to death, and I did as well. And so when I heard the news that the assailants, the murderers, were convicted, I'd like to say it was joyous, but it wasn't. It was sad, because in the end, what it really, really comes down to is that 3 lives have now been lost.
So, those of you that are Stephen A. Smith groupies, or even haters, but you groupies, y'all need to let Stephen A. Smith know that when he starts lying and exaggerating and goes into full-blown Stephen A. Cap mode, I've already told him, like, hey, bro, I've read your book. I've done the research. I'm going to call you out on these things. And so I think Stephen A. thinks like it's 2019, 2021, 2022, but it's some long gone era when he could just get away with saying whatever he wants and no one was going to check him on it. Stephen A. chose to pick a fight with me, and so I'm in this fight for the long haul. And so, Stephen A., don't just go to your podcast, just don't go on TV and say anything willy-nilly, because we're going to fact check you on this show. And so many of you all have missed the point and think, some people are like, man, Whitlock called him out for his fake basketball career. And I did call him out for his fake basketball career. But if you go back and watch the original show I did about Stephen A.'s memoir, Straight Shooter, A Lifetime of First Takes and Second Chances, or whatever it's called, I read his memoir and I walked you through how, like, virtually everything that Stephen A. Smith says about his life and background is either a lie or exaggerated. It's either a lie or it's exaggerated. And this goes well beyond just his make-believe Winston-Salem State basketball career. I broke my kneecap in half. I got a 6-inch screw in my knee. Big House Gaines was like a father figure to me. I know he didn't mention me in his book. I know that there's the Wilt Chamberlain photo. I know that there's this stat sheet, and I know I can't remember. I've gone well beyond that. And I tried to explain to you that everything in his book is a fabrication or an exaggeration. None of it's true. The guy's job is to lie about everything. And I believe he's lying here as it relates to Jam Master Jay. And I'm going to walk you through why. And I would love for Stephen A. Smith to answer this for me. Because Stephen A., I read your book. You wrote the book. You've been very clear. You wrote it. You didn't have a ghostwriter. It's you. So walk me through this. I want to read you a quote from Stephen A's book. I believe this is on page 42. And this is where, in writing, he talks about Basil and gives a clue that kind of makes me say, well, hold on, man. Because earlier in the book, or at some point in the book, same thing he said on his podcast about how his brother was close to Jam Master Jay and they were good friends. So Stephen A., a journalist is reading your book and doing a legitimate review. I know no one else in the media will touch this. They don't care that the top person in the sports media industry is a pathological fabricator or exaggerator. No one cares that you're a plant and installed and you have a hostile relationship with the truth. I happen to care, and I'm going to call you out on it. So here's on page 42 of Stephen A's book. Basil and I weren't all that close growing up. He was 9 years older, and when I was 8, he left to join the Air Force, literally the day after graduating from high school. That's Stephen A. Smith in his own words. His brother, 9 years older, left for the Air Force immediately after graduating high school. Why is that important? Because again, I've done the homework and I've done the research. I want to put up the birthdays of the members of Run-DMC, and I want to put up the birthdays of Stephen A. Smith and his brother. Jam Master Jay, real name Jason Mizell. This is the man that was murdered. January 21st, 1965. Daryl Mack, better known as DMC, 5/31/1964. Reverend Run, Joseph Simmons, 11/14/1964. Stephen A. Smith's birthday is 10/14/1967. Basil Smith, Stephen A. Smith's brother, November 11th, 1958. So, 1958, Basil. And so, 9 years older than Stephen A. Smith, as soon as Basil graduated high school, he left for the Air Force, according to Stephen A.'s book. So that means that in 1976, 77 at the latest, but 1976, Basil left Hollis, Queens for New York, and according to his book, Basil didn't get along with Stephen A. Smith's dad and all of that, and he just couldn't wait to get away. And then when he came back, he worked in Texas and other places, didn't come back to Hollis, Queens. The man left in 1976. How old was Jam Master Jay in 1976? Well, I know I was not good at math, but I think if my math is right, if I carry the one, the two, go back, 1965, I believe. Scroll back, let me see, make sure I get this date right. Yeah, 1965. So in 1976, Jam Master Jay is 11 years old. And he's very, very, very good friends with Basil, Stephen A.'s brother. An 18-year-old is very, very good friends with an 11-year-old in Hollis, Queens. An 18-year-old is very, very good friends with an 11-year-old in Indianapolis, Indiana, in Gary, Indiana, in Nashville, Tennessee, in Orange County, California, in Kansas City, Missouri. An 18-year-old, very, very good friends with an 11-year-old. Make it make sense. Think it through. Take a moment. If you need to count on hands and feet, just think it through. He's lying. What were an 11-year-old and an 18-year-old? Or what was a 17-year-old and a 10-year-old? or a 16-year-old and a 9-year-old? What was their very, very close friendship based on? Is he trying to tell us something about Basil and young kids? Or is he exaggerating? Is he lying? Is he making it up? Is he being very careful and delicate with how he unpacks this story? Because it would make far, far more sense for Stephen A. Smith to claim, hey, I was very good friends with Run-DMC growing up. I was born in 1967. These guys were born in 1964 and 1965. They were on my block. And just remember, and I wish I meant to ask these guys to get the tape of Stephen A. where he talked about he was protected on his block. The drug dealers had put the word out that Stephen A. Smith was untouchable. I forgot to ask these guys to get that clip, but we've played it previously. You got to remember, Stephen A. Smith is untouchable in his neighborhood. He was such a basketball prodigy, and he was such a good student that the drug dealers and everybody in that community had said, hands off Stephen A. Smith. He's untouchable. Remember, so he's a well-known kid in that neighborhood. But he doesn't have a relationship with any of the guys from Run-DMC, who are a lot closer to his age than his brother. Think it through. Why is he lying? He knows he can't say that he was close friends with any of these guys from Run-DMC because these other two, DMC and Reverend Run, they're still alive. And they might have to come comment on, yeah, tell us about growing up with Stephen A. Smith and how tight y'all were. They're not willing to participate in that lie. As far as I know, and you guys will have to help me out, help me out here, but as far as I know, as far as I've been able to tell, I could be wrong. But First Take is basically a hip-hop sports show. Has any member from Run-DMC been on First Take at any time? Because I say that to say, y'all hear, and again, Tech Nine, not as big a deal as Run-DMC. But you hear, I've talked about Tech Nine and being in Kansas City and being friends with Tech Nine and the 57th Street Road Dog Villains and I could drop Rich the Factor. Those of you, you'd have to really, really know independent rap music to know Rich the Factor in Kansas City. But any rap name you hear me drop, there's pictures of me with them. There's likely video of me. I've had Tech Nine on different things I've done, either at ESPN or maybe even at Fox Sports, but I was on a Tech Nine album, KOD, King of Darkness. I'm on there, interview with Jason Whitlock. And I'm not saying that to brag, because again, y'all know how I feel about hip hop and me and Tech and the 57th Street Road Dog Villains and Rich the Factor and why can I think, the Popper. We all argued about rap music. I liked it, but I was a critic of it. And these guys would get upset with me from time to time, and Bakari and T. Will, and they get upset with me from time to time. We'd argue about all of it. But here's Stephen A. Smith allegedly grew up a block, on the same block as Run-DMC. And just like we can't get no pictures of it. As far as I know, maybe y'all can correct, maybe Run-DMC has been on First Take and they've talked about all of this. I don't know, I haven't seen it. Haven't been able to find it. But it just doesn't make sense. He's lying, he's fabricating. His brother left at 18 in 1976 when Jam Master Jay was an 11-year-old little kid. and you're on TV pretending like they were BFF? If so, Basil got some explaining to do. Basil's passed. He died. We checked. That story isn't fabricated. He died in a car accident. Stephen A., where his brother died, Stephen A. actually lists the wrong city in the book where Basil actually died in Texas. I mean, Stephen A.'s book is just littered with factual mistakes. What city Basil died in. I got the records of where he died at. Stephen A. don't even know when his parents got married. He lists 1958. In the book, he says parents got married in 1958, and then shortly thereafter, my oldest sister, Linda, they got pregnant with her right after they got married. And again, he says, and these are small details, but again, you're writing a book, you're a best-selling author, you're worth all this money, you have editors. They didn't fact-check anything. Linda was born in 1957, according to her birth certificate. And she was the first child. She's born in 1957. Stephen A. says in the book that the parents got married in 58 and shortly thereafter got pregnant with Linda. There are so many factual errors, so many I just don't know how it happens unless it's all a stretch, an exaggeration, a fabrication. But I want someone out there to ask Stephen A. Smith, explain to me how his brother is BFF with an 11-year-old. Growing up in Hollis, they were very, very close. I know my brother loved him to death. Did they become friends? You got to remember, I think Basil, according to Stephen A.'s book and our research, I think he died in 1992 at the age of 33. I know he died at the age of 33. So you leave, is my math right on that? If you're born in 1958, and you die you're either 33 or 34. And so you leave in 76. Maybe he comes home from the Air Force and he becomes friends with, 6-7 years later when Jam Master Jay is 18 and Run-DMC is taking off in the early 80s. Maybe they became BFF then. Maybe the 24-year-old Jam Master Jay became best friends with 31-year-old Basil Smith when he was on leave from the Air Force or whatever job, whatever city he was working in. Maybe that's when they all connected. But someone help Stephen A. unpack that, explain that. To me, it sounds more like cap. It sounds a lot like, let's play the video of Stephen A. talk about how protected he was in his neighborhood. It sounds a lot like this story.
That we just finished talking about when I talk about how, I'm not snitching, I'm not talking, I'm not getting into people's personal business or whatever. I grew up with that code. One of the biggest drug dealers in Hollis literally lived directly across the street from me. He was a killer. And it was understood, Steve is not to be touched. You got dealers in Hollis, Steve is not to be touched. They understood that there was potential in me, and they literally threatened they were going to whip my ass if they ever saw me on the corner involved in the drug game in any way. They said we didn't have a choice.
How did they know? How did they know that about you?
They would see me on the basketball court. First of all, the level of diligence that I put forth, that I'd shoot like 300 J's a day and stuff like that. They'd see me in school. They know I came home, I'd do my homework, put in the work, whatever. They knew that I wasn't trying to be about that life. And so their whole mentality was, you got your mother there, you got your 4 older sisters there, active part of your life. You got a support system. You don't have to do this. We did. We made our choice. But we ain't gonna let you make this choice. And literally, I've had several of them tell me, we will fuck you up. Do not be on this corner. Do not be doing this. Do not be
Cared about
going
you.
to bust
Yeah.
your ass.
Wow.
And they meant it. And I knew they meant it. And so they would sit up there, they'd let me shoot, stuff like that. It would get dark. They had to get into their game. They said, all right, it's time for you to go. But it was understood. People in the neighborhood, it was widely known, do not touch me with that game.
I'm going to put a button on this conversation, then we're going to get to Steve Kim. Just very quickly. Look. So Stephen A. is the drug dealers in Hollis, Queens. They all knew Stephen A. is not to be touched. The biggest dope dealer in the area lived across the street from Stephen A. Don't touch Stephen A. Everybody knew he had all this potential, blah, blah, blah. So Jam Master Jay, he got murdered in a bad drug deal. He was involved in the dope game. And he allegedly double-crossed these two guys that ended up killing him. So at some point, Jam Master Jay entered the drug game, drug world. No surprise, he's a rapper. But Stephen A. has no connection to Jam Master Jay, even though he's this well-known prodigy in the neighborhood that had this future Winston-Salem State basketball career, and he was untouchable. But he didn't know Jam Master Jay. It's his brother, who's 7 years older than Jam Master Jay. That's who was tight with Jam Master Jay. It's Cap. Cap, for those of you in the audience that are Blaze TV subscribers, it's a lie. That's what Cap means. Lying. Exaggerating. BS. Like what you saw? Hit that like button, subscribe, and check out the full episode by clicking the link below.